everyone. Doing things in slightly different order today. So if you don't know me, my name's Cesca. I'm one of the occasional preachers here. And my challenge today, should I choose to accept it, is to make some kind of sense of a very long and very complex passage in 20 minutes. So what I want to do is I want to put a bit of a challenge to you today. I want you not just to listen to the passage, but I want you to engage in it. So what I want you all to do is just imagine that you're one of the disciples living through all the experiences this week. As Nick talks, and we'll be doing it in chunks, so you don't have to think about it all at once. As Nick talks, think about how would you feel in the situation? What would you be thinking about in the situation? Okay, so let's start.
Jesus anointed at Bethany. We're reading John chapter 12, and you'll find it on page 1079 of the Church Bibles. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used it to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me.
I wonder what experience you had as you thought of those things. Now, I feel if I had been there, my main feeling would have been unease and embarrassment. I mean, this totally over-the-top act that Mary performed. But more than that, in this culture, women, respectable women, always had their heads covered. And there was a distance between men and women. So many social boundaries were being broken as Mary was wiping her expensive perfume on Jesus' feet. I don't think anyone sitting there would have felt happy about it. And maybe some of you, and maybe me a bit, sympathised with Judas. Yeah, the money could have been better spent. And what's Jesus saying? Why is he talking about his burial? Why is he talking about going away? What's this all about? And then,
meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. For on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and putting their faith in him.
it was actually a scary time to be a disciple. If you go back into chapter 11, Jesus had actually taken the disciples away to hide because of the threat from the Jewish leaders. And so the disciples must be thinking, what on earth are we doing in Jerusalem at this dangerous time? But then,
the next day, the great crowd that had come for the feast heard that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. They took palm branches and went out to meet him, shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel." Jesus found a young donkey and sat upon it. As it is written, "Do not be afraid, O daughter of Zion. See, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt." At first, his disciples did not understand all this. Only after Jesus was glorified did they realize that these things had been written about him and that they had done these things to him. Now the crowd that was with him when he called Lazarus from the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to spread the word. Many people, because they had heard that he had given this miraculous sign, went out to meet him. So the Pharisees said to one another, "See, this is getting us nowhere. Look how the whole world has gone after him."
And suddenly, on this roller coaster week, we're on a real high. This is the way it's meant to be, isn't it? Everyone praising Jesus. Him coming as king. This is the moment we've been waiting for, isn't it? Jesus is going to come in, he's going to raise his army, he's going to take over Jerusalem, he's going to kick out the Romans, and then eventually he's going to rule the whole world. And the disciples, wow, good time for them, isn't it? Because they're going to be his right-hand people. Everything's looking good. But
now there were some Greeks among those who went up to worship at the feast. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, with a request. "Sir," they said, "we would like to see Jesus." Philip went to tell Andrew. Andrew and Philip in turn told Jesus. Jesus replied, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. I tell you the truth. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. The man who loves his life will lose it, while the man who hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor those who serve me. Now my heart is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, it was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name." Then a voice came from heaven. "I have glorified it, and will glorify it again." The crowd that was there and heard it said it had thundered. Others said an angel had spoken to him. Jesus said, "This voice was for your benefit, not mine. Now is the time for judgment on this world. Now the prince of the world will be driven out. But when I'm lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself." He said this to show the kind of death he was going to die. The crowd spoke up. "We have heard from the law that the Christ will remain forever. So how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man?" Then Jesus told them, "You are going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, before darkness overtakes you. The man who walks in the dark does not know where he is going. Put your trust in the light while you have it, so that you may become sons of light." When he had finished speaking, Jesus left and hid himself from them.
And now as a disciple, you must be utterly confused. What on earth is this all about? What is Jesus saying? One moment, triumphal entry, and the next moment he's talking about his death. But you know Jesus, what he says is never clear. Is this a metaphor? Is it a parable? Or is he really going to die? And what's he saying about the people who follow him? Is he really pleased with his disciples for giving up everything to follow him? Or is he saying, no, I want even more? Very confusing. And then the voice from heaven comes and God speaks directly to Jesus. Wow. And then Jesus talks about defeating Satan. But he also talks about leaving in the darkness. What on earth is this all about?
Even after Jesus had done all these miraculous signs in their presence, they still would not believe him. This was to fulfill the word of Isaiah the prophet. Lord, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For this reason they could not believe, because, as Isaiah says elsewhere, he has blinded their eyes and deadened their hearts, so they can neither see with their eyes, nor understand with their hearts, nor turn, and I would heal them. But Isaiah said this because he saw Jesus' glory and spoke about him. Yet at the same time, many, even among the leaders, believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they would not confess their faith, for fear they would be put out of the synagogue. For they loved praise from men more than praise from God.
This must have been confusing for the disciples. They knew Jesus, they saw him, they saw his miracles, they heard his teaching. How could people not be moved by this? Was it perhaps that God actually blinded them? Or was it just that they were so involved in their own lives they weren't seeing and they weren't listening? And then
Jesus cried out, "When a man believes in me, he does not believe in me only, but in the one who sent me. When he looks at me, he sees the one who sent me. I have come into the world as a light, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. As for the person who hears my words but does not keep them, I do not judge him, for I did not come to judge the world, but to save it. There is a judge for the one who rejects me and does not accept my words. That very word which I spoke will condemn him at the last day. For I did not speak of my own accord, but the Father who sent me commanded me what to say and how to say it. I know that his commands lead to eternal life, so whatever I say is just what the Father has told me to say."
Wait a minute. Did Jesus just say he was God? That's a new thing, isn't it? He says, whoever sees me sees the Father. And what's he saying? He's saying that the whole world will be judged on their response to him. And all this stuff about eternal life. What is happening? I think if I was a disciple and I got to the end of this week, I would just be totally confused. What on earth is going on? So thanks, Nick. That was great. So we're just going to look at a couple of bits from the chapter. And the first one is Jesus. And how many roles do we see Jesus showing in the chapter? And first of all, we see Jesus as God, don't we? We see him accepting Mary's worship as if that was fine. We see him saying, whoever sees me sees the Father. He's saying that the whole of human outcome depends on belief in him. He says he's the light in the darkness. Secondly, we see Jesus as king. He very deliberately rode into Jerusalem on a donkey to act out Zechariah's prophecy about God's king coming in, humble, on a donkey. He tells his followers that they have to be totally singly minded, following him, just as a king rules his subjects. But at the same time as Jesus is God and king, he's also the rejected one. The Jewish authorities want to kill him. A lot of people just totally ignore him, not interested. Then we see Jesus as a man who's troubled. I think troubled is a bit of a light word for someone who's about to go through torture and die and really doesn't want to do that at all. But this is John's version of Jesus' worries in Gethsemane. But he's going to be steadfast and he's going to go for it, however painful it's going to be, because he knows it's the only way to save the world. And lastly, we see Jesus as sacrifice, as the one who's going to be lifted up, not as a mighty king, but crucified on a cross to save the whole world. And that is why he's come. And we need this broad view of Jesus. We need to see him in all his aspects, because if we concentrate on one, we miss out. So if we concentrate on Jesus the man, going steadfastly to Jerusalem to his death, we miss out on his power and his glory. If we concentrate on Jesus riding into Jerusalem on his donkey, victorious and righteous, we miss out when we come across opposition. So we need to read the whole of the Old and the New Testament to understand who Jesus is, to pray through it, to worship, to listen to teaching, to discuss it in house groups, everything to make Jesus more real to us. But the other side we see is the response of the people to Jesus, don't we? And we see a sort of continuum that starts with the people who just want Jesus dead. And then we have Judas, who's just about to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And then we have all the people that just, well, who's this Jesus? I'm busy with my life. And then we have the secret believers, like Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, who keep their positions of authority. They believe in Jesus, but they like the praise of people more. Then we have the people on Palm Sunday, and there would be a lot of different people. There'd be some that were along for the spectacle. Well, this looks interesting. There are those who are curious because they'd heard about Jesus' miracles. There'd be those who actually believed that Jesus was going to be their kind of Messiah, doing what they wanted him to do, going to Jerusalem to start ruling the world. And all those three groups could easily have been there on Good Friday shouting, "Crucify him," as they realized Jesus wasn't who they expected him to be. Then there's the true believers, the disciples, those who followed Jesus for however many years, who are there shouting his praises because they believe in him. And then, of course, there's the ultimate, Mary, totally breaking all social conventions so that she can show her love and her worship. And so there's a kind of continuum, and we can all look at ourselves and we can say, where are we on this continuum? Well, I don't think there's anyone who hits the not interested, but we can probably all see ourselves in all the other bits. So we're called to be followers of Jesus. And this is Holy Week. We've got a long bank holiday coming up. We've got opportunities. This is the time for us to think, who is this Jesus that we worship? How can we get to know him better, understand him more fully? Who are we? Where are we in our discipleship? Are we secret disciples who believe as long as it doesn't cost us anything? Or are we Marys who will give everything for Jesus, or something in between? So, the challenge for us all is to spend some time this Holy Week thinking this through. How do we be true disciples of Jesus living in Surrey in the 21st century?